This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to another edition of Lemberdopic Live here on unprecedented.tv, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is as best we can. Apologies for the slightly late start. I'm going to blame my guest, but I'll do that once he's on the stage. Coming up today, of course, we've got not just the second most important thing going on in the world, which is the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to seek the makings of peace in Ukraine. We've also got some great broadcasting going out. Possibly, we're still waiting to see because it's a huge technical challenge, but possibly WarrenThornton.com will finally grace the airwaves of Unprecedented TV in a complicated and very important deal. We are collaborating with Warren Thornton, one of the most authoritative voices about military matters anywhere in the world, based in the Philippines, and he hopefully will be gracing us with 2 hours, no less, 2 hours of broadcasting at some point today. Watch this space. It's a fast-moving situation here at Unprecedented, but if we get him, that will be great. That'll be a regular fixture for 6 days a week, no less. Also, by popular demand, many of you were shocked and stunned by the vaccination outrage, which we covered with Claire Dyer and Debbie Evans a couple of days ago. So in response to popular demand, we'll be rebroadcasting that. If you're watching in the United Kingdom, that's at 5 o'clock UK time. And who knows what else we might be able to put out today as well. Things are moving apace here. And thank you. This is all because you're watching, which makes it worthwhile. And a big shout out to everybody who's started watching the Live and Let Die series with me and Mark Oaten, my old friend from the days of Parliament. He was a Liberal Democrat. Seems more like a Tory to me now. Mark, I hope you're watching. And that's going to be a regular feature as well. We've decided to continue that because many thousands of you are watching. And a bit of a teaser here. We're in advanced negotiations with somebody who used to be a former member of Parliament, but not in my party. We'll be talking with him as well. He could be the next special guest on Free Speech Central. I need to remember the names of my own shows, of Free Speech Central, led by Joe Marnie, who is a political journalist. So much to watch. I'll give a little trailer of some of the shows that we've got a little bit later on. But back to today. What do you think of the police? What do you think of the state of the country? Are we actually being well served by our security services? Why do they seem to be walking counter protesters in to places like the Bell Hotel, where locals have been objecting to the alleged criminal activities of, let's call them what they are, illegal migrants, people who come here illegally. First thing they do when they arrive is set foot on the shores of the country without permission. You and I have to go through passport control. They get in a boat, run up the beach, and Bob's your uncle. 4-star hotel, mobile phone, everything. What's not to like from that? Maybe you think the police are doing a great job, and I've no doubt many of them are. But there are others who are very disappointed by the performance of the police. Well, I've never been in the police, so I can't really comment from a first-hand experience. But I know a man who has. This is the man who's committed a crime this morning, Keith Tordoff, who may have been a great police officer, but he's pretty rubbish at tech. Why couldn't you make your other camera work? You've kept
Good morning, Lemmy. Well,
Keith.
technology passed me by, but I've got a person who normally can, but it's a bit early for them to be involved.
All right. Well, this time, think of this as a first offence then. You get away with a warning. I've never said
Thank
that to a
you.
police officer before. Anyway, thank you very much. Tell us a little bit about on to business. Tell us before we start talking about the police, and if there's a chance, I want to have a quick chat with you about the Alaskan summit as well, because you're not just a jack of all trades, you're a master of all subjects too. Hence your MBE. What does MBE stand for?
Member of the British Order of the Empire, Order of the Member of the. I forgot myself nearly. Remember, it's 2018 when I got awarded it. So, member of the British Empire, basically.
Aren't we all members of the British Empire?
Yeah. Member of the order. It's member of the Order of the British Empire.
What did you get it for?
I got it for service to the businesses and to the community.
Not for IT, then. Okay. So
Definitely not for IT, and that, as I said, that's very much my weakness. But I've got a person who can.
It's a happy trade because your strengths easily exceed your weaknesses. Tell us a little bit about your police career before we start talking about the police itself.
Well, obviously my police service is historic, but I was in the West Yorkshire Police Force. I served as a constable, I was a detective, I worked on the so-called Yorkshire Ripper murders. Actually went to the very first one in 1975, which was unfortunately Wilma McCann, who was found on Scott Hall playing fields in Leeds, and went on to work on the various ones. I was a firearms trained officer. I carried out personal protection to such as Margaret Thatcher when she visited West Yorkshire, and Home Secretaries, etc. So it's you lost me for a second there, Lemmy.
No,
Sorry.
don't worry about that. Don't worry. You just carry on. I can hear you. Don't worry.
All right. So so personal protection to sort of people like Margaret Thatcher and the Home Secretaries of the day when they came to West Yorkshire. Had an interesting career, got promoted in the ranks, and served in many areas of West Yorkshire, so Bradford, Leeds, Wakefield. And on leaving the police with an exemplary service record, I went on to work for Bank of Scotland as an investigator for the north of England for 10 years. I've run the family business, which was the oldest sweet shop in England, which is based in a little place called Paisley with my family. As you can see behind me, there's posters, film posters. With my wife, and I run an original film poster gallery in Paisley, the only one outside of London, with thousands of original film posters, which used to be outside the cinemas. I've been a community champion for things like the Chamber of Trade, for the Britain in Bloom group, which won national titles for Best High Street in the country, all voluntary, and enjoy life and keep a sort of track of things and an involvement in what's going on, hopefully, in the world. I've stood for Police Fire Crime Commissioner of North Yorkshire in 2021. I stood in the York and North Yorkshire mayoral election last year, and also in the general election last year, every time as an independent candidate, funding my own campaign, trying to, I suppose, challenge and change the political system. But as an independent, a very difficult thing to try and achieve, but got great support, and I came third in the Police and Fire Crime Commissioner election behind the Conservative candidate who won and the Labour candidate, so beating the Lib Dems and others. So yeah, I've interesting life. I've dealt with lots and lots of different situations in the course of that, and certainly from a business perspective, got a certain understanding with that, and hopefully with political head-on a little bit of the world events as well.
Well, that's all we've got time for today. Just kidding. You said something else. You said you have those posters with your wife. Does that mean you were married to Raquel Welsh?
Yeah. Well, there they are. Let's put it this way. Unfortunately, she has passed away, but yes, she would certainly been a candidate if I'd have had a chance.
I think you're going to not be married very much longer if you carry on like that, laddie. There we go.
Well, I've got a long, understanding relationship with my wife, over 50 years now. So I think she gets the measure of me and understands me, and lets me get on with things.
In the nature of social media, you can never take back what you just said. But there we go. Thanks very much indeed. Let's talk about, first of all, it's a spectacular star-spangled career. And like me, you've tried a lot of different things. My view for the last 35, 40 years has been that the meaning of life is the journey itself. We know the destination. It's what you do between the beginning and the end that defines your life. So I salute you for what you've done. And of course, a lot of that was in the police. And that's one of the things I really want to talk about. Why? Because the police have been in the media a lot recently, and not always for good reasons. The context is that a lot of people feel the police have been heavily politicized. And I want to ask you a couple of things on this. But first of all, a very obvious example of this has been the wokeification of the police. And the team here, in preparation for the show, actually came across a rather odd event, which I'm not sure made me feel particularly comfortable. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, I don't know. But I'm just wondering if actually one of the issues we've got is the police have really, if you like, they've just become a little bit more, or maybe too woke. Here's an example of a policeman proposing to his boyfriend in the middle of a gay pride march. What do you think?
Well, I don't wish to be a party pooper, but when you're working, you're supposed to be working. And as a police officer in a disciplined service, personally, I think it's appalling, and it lets everybody down. It's causing embarrassment to other colleagues. So what do they do? How do they respond to that? And I think that certainly the senior officers should have taken a strong stance on it. It's very, very poor and embarrassing, as I say, to hopefully people who've got any ounce of common sense. I'm not against any sort of people living the life they want to do, gay relationships, etc. And there's a time and place, and that certainly isn't the time, and it certainly isn't the place.
The difficulty also is that was one of the more moderate videos that we considered using today, because it seems to me that the police have allowed themselves to be sucked into a very uncomfortable place. It's not homophobic to say what you've just said. And I always say, what about if it was the other way around? If the policeman had done that to a female, a policeman had done it to a female girlfriend. There's just some sort of a line which has been crossed here. But
I think we've got. Yeah, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the police service are supposed to be a disciplined service, and I think that that's a breakdown in discipline. And I think that's what I say, it makes it very awkward for such as the supervisory officer, whether that's the sergeant who's next in the chain or the inspector or further up. And it shouldn't have taken place, and it shows there's a lack of training, poor recruitment in the first place, possibly with people, because the training should have told people that you've got a responsibility, and you've got to remain, and which these parades have caused a problem with, remain impartial. And it's not showing impartiality with something which really is a little bit of an agenda quite often with these organisations and groups who are putting these marches and processions together.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I hear people talking about privately. But here's the problem, Keith. You've said it in a reasoned and sensible way. But others say, well, I can't possibly say that because I'll be accused of being homophobic, or I don't want to seem like I'm anti-gay. And so the kind of comment you've just made that there tends to get suppressed because of this wokeism. Now, to be quite clear, when you see public displays of affection between any two people, regardless of gender, on, let's say, the London Underground or on a train, it can make people feel uncomfortable. And as you say, there's a time and a place for it. When it comes to private citizens, it's arguable. I suppose it's not illegal, but when you see it with somebody in uniform, it can make people feel distinctly ill at ease. And as you say, presumably if they're in uniform, they're on duty, and the taxpayer has just sponsored that incident. And maybe, as you said to yourself, it sounds like we're being party poopers. But for those people who don't feel so comfortable about this endless diet of sexualization of our society, they're not going to be completely sure that these people are doing the right thing when, for example, phone theft is, as far as I can tell, at a record high.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the problem. The public coming across situations where they're not getting any response from the police to their, situation, whether it be a retailer with shoplifting or somebody who's got an intruder in the house, some disturbance where the police don't come along to in a public place. So, I mean, the fact the police officers did what they did at that parade, it's a bit like the parents with a teenage son or daughter suddenly starting to embrace and kiss in the street or something, and they'd be very embarrassed. So, to me, that situation was wholly embarrassing, not good to watch. People might say, well, that's, not the spirit to look at it with. I'm afraid that I come back to it. The police should be disciplined. They should be there for controlling if the crowds, etc. I don't really see that there should be a necessity, if there's not going to be any trouble, for the amount of police officers that they actually deploy to these marches, to these pride movements, etc. What kind of trouble they're expecting from the number of police officers who go there? And other officers, I feel, will feel under pressure, peer pressure, to do things if they start to put rainbows on the uniform, on their epaulets, on the helmets, and it just becomes a farce. And we're losing sight of what the police should be about, which is that service which serves everybody without fear or favour. And other people are starting to look at it and saying they're tending to favour maybe one group without fear or favour. Remain impartial, do a job, be professional, and that will be respected by everybody.
As something of an aside, my concern isn't what someone's sexual orientation is. My concern is that we get the impression that sexual orientation becomes elevated above all else. Now, to be blunt, sex is an important part of life, but it's not key to life itself. And as somebody said recently, we don't need to endlessly employ people to tell us to be tolerant, because most people are. And I don't think Kemi Badenoch's doing a particularly good job as leader of the Conservatives, but no one, as far as I know, talks about the colour of her skin, or not anybody I know. And the same goes for this. I don't walk into rooms and ask everyone's sexual orientation before we start the meeting. And I just feel that what we've got here, and I'm just using this as an example because there are many other woke examples here as well, where the police seem to have lost the point, where they seem to have forgotten what they're there for is to prevent significant breaches of the law. But then they go around messing about like this on gay pride marches because it's regarded as a social gain to see the police wearing these coloured things. And I think we saw a rainbow flag at the beginning as well, Keith.
Yeah, I think, we had to move from where we were years ago. We had to show more sort of a tolerant approach, because certainly when I was policing, which I said was historic, we were in a time when certainly we had what we called vice squads in police forces, and vice squads which used to go to the public toilets and arrest people for what was an offence called importuning, which was basically picking up other males in generally public toilets. And we had to move on from that, which is a good thing. And I think there needed to be more tolerance, and we've let people live the life, get on with it. And we hopefully are tolerant to people with different styles, different ideas. But in relation to the police, they have, I think, they've gone too far. They've become, as you say, this word woke. they've become, and that's really because a lot of the policing, which you touched on earlier, has been politicised, and the politicisation of it, this is part of the agenda which we're seeing not just in the police force, we're seeing it in, you know, most probably the armed services, we've seen it in schools with children, etc. And the problem is that there's certain people, I think, pushing agendas, and they should be allowing the police to get on and do what they're supposed to do, which is serve the public. And the policing way has totally changed. And I don't think that they're being recruited correctly. I think it's all being rushed, and there's a high turnover of officers. I think that they, once they're there, they're not trained sufficiently well. They don't know how to speak to people. There's a certain amount of macho-ness about it. And I think that's come along because of things like being provided with tasers and walking around almost semi-military in terms of what they wear. I say I was a firearms officer, and admittedly it was the era where it was a handgun or a shotgun, not the era of where we've got semi-automatic weapons, etc. But it's a bit like, quite often I see them in a small community like ours, and you'd think there's a war about to start with the amount of gear and equipment they're all carrying. And I think an element of that is that police officers have lost the ability to communicate with people. They're too distant from them. Going harking back, I suppose, we haven't got small police stations where people could go in and talk to police officers. Everything's virtually out of town, so people have to make a trip if they're going to go and report something or go to a police station. And it's almost as though the authorities decided that they don't want the people to have to or go and see police officers. So I think we've lost a lot of the things that we should have had. That was why I stood for Police Fire Crime Commission in 2021. I wanted to try and work with the Chief Constable, and in North Yorkshire's case, the Chief Fire Officer, to try and bring things to a level where we achieved a certain amount of respect from the public and got their support. The police have lost the support of so many members of the public from what they see, such as police officers proposing gay pride type marches, etc. The respect goes, and it's hard fought for, is that, and we're losing it or lost it in some cases. And I know many people who say, if I saw a police officer in trouble, I would go to help. And that's a sorry state of affairs, because at the end of the day, each and every one of us in our own way should be a police officer ready to defend and protect our communities.
It must be said that sometimes the police have in my life experience, behaved in an exemplary fashion. I have to say, there's a case I know of domestic abuse where the police handled it really well, really well. And I also think that I've covered this elsewhere with actually Nick Buckley, MBE, you got that in common, the assault at Manchester Airport, where initially the mainstream media disgustingly, to their eternal shame, tried to suggest that the police had been responsible for some sort of a racist attack on these people. And it turns out that, at least in part, they've been found guilty of assault against the police. So in that context, it's not a job I'd want to do these days. And it remains to be seen if it's a minority or not, but I suspect it is a minority. But the difficulty is, once you begin to compromise the police's reputation, even with a corrupt minority, all kinds of problems come from that. Now, just one word on that Manchester thing. I don't know about you, but I was outraged when the mainstream media immediately, and this is in defense of the police now, the Manchester police, when the press immediately said, oh, this is racist, and only because of the color of the skin of, it turned out to be the assailant. What did you think about how that was covered?
I think the police are in a very, very difficult position all the time, because it's a really no-win situation. And certainly something like Manchester, I think we do have to be careful, which at one time when media wasn't quite as easy to cover things, i.e. CCTV, which is now available, everybody with a mobile phone to film things. I think from the very start, we should be very careful how things are relayed and how it's portrayed in the press or on social media. It's a constant battle, I think, to try and balance that. But police officers generally are in a very, very difficult position. And I think it stems from the top. You know, the saying, when the fish starts stinking, it starts at the head. And I think we've got the College of Policing, where the majority of all the police chiefs are trained through. And I think that is a political organisation virtually, and they're instructed by government, and the police should be allowed to be independent and free. So something like Manchester, I think unfortunately the coverage now is too great in terms of what goes out to start off with. I think that there aren't enough there isn't enough self-restraint from both the media and the public. I mean, the public have always time to film these things, but they don't help. And I'm sure many of them would be able to help in some shape or form. The racism card is going to be a difficult one, because in this country, we're all literally walking on, sort of tiptoes, on eggshells, because people are worried about being accused of racist. We should all be able to live together. We're all the same when it comes down to it, but I think, again, it stems from the head, it stems from the top. The allowing division between people, which is what actually, in some ways, I believe government like division. They want to divide people. They want to divide us. And that's why they highlight some of these things, because that means they can bring in controls. And more and more, we're seeing controls being brought in on the guise of such large divisions with things. And who creates the problem? And certainly, usually, the government, whether it be allowing migrants, illegal immigrants to come into the country on the dinghies, whether it's the policing of certain things. It's all orchestrated quite often. And you talked about shipping people into these protests, such as Epping, etc.
I want to come to that. I want to come to that very point in just a minute. So hold your fire there for a minute, Keith, because I want to ask exactly about that. And we've got a very, in my view, very disturbing piece of footage, which completely contradicts what the Chief Constable had said. We'll come to that in a minute. Before we do, though, I am obliged to remind you, dear viewer, that in the ever-expanding portfolio of unprecedented TV's programs, you are spoiled for choice. We've got everything from Christine Joanna Hart, Inside the Mind, where she has such amazing guests to talk about everything from computer consciousness through to the psychic world. Tim Scott, Uncancelled, who is the head of the Freedom Association. We will soon have a Nick Dark from the dark side, where there's dark, there's light, and so much more. Have a look at this. And that's just a taste. There's so much more as well. Delighted to be able to share those with you, and more programs coming on stream all the time. Keith Tordoff, one thing that all of the guests illustrated in that video can do is turn on their camera.
Keep having a go. Keep having a go at me, Lemby. I don't mind.
No, I can't. I don't dare to do that again, because we're so grateful you're here. You're such a great guest, honestly. I know that I can hear my producer saying to you that let he who was out blame cast the first stone. I get it, Mouse. I know. I've made some basic schoolboy errors in the last 24 hours on air. So, I like
a bit of banter. I like a bit of banter, Lembit, so don't worry.
You say that now, but to quote a phrase from Northern Ireland, you know where I live. So maybe I should drop it there. The story so far, you just raised something before our little self-promotion there. about the police helping counter-protesters go to, and you were very specific, the Bell Hotel, which is a migrant hotel, which has caused outrage in the local community because it's believed that individuals from that hotel, illegal immigrants, let's not dress this up, asylum seekers, people who come into this country illegally, often with no papers, run up the beach and then claim asylum or get fished out of the channel. They may have been committing sexual assaults. I think there's an active live case going on there. We're not going to go into that. But the police then, in one of these demonstrations in London, denied that they were helping to get counter-protesters in. But look at this. This film was taken, I believe, by one of our own presenters.
Why are they allowed to block the road? Why, excuse me, why is it back at the hotel? Obviously no one's allowed in the road, but these are allowed to march through the entire road.
I'm not making the decisions, miss, unfortunately.
No, I think it's a valid question, isn't it?
It is.
Because people out there have been arrested for wearing masks.
Yeah.
Literally, we've just watched the arrest for wearing a mask.
Okay.
Obviously, if you step into the road, you're being pushed off the road, and yet this is allowed. I can't work out why it's one rule for one with the police.
I can't comment on the difference between the road and not, but what I can say is...
See, these have been allowed to make their way up there, so when they get up there, they're allowed to physically block the road when there's already been arrests made for wearing masks, and they're all wearing masks. I think this is a valid question. So all of these police are allowing them to wear masks and obstruct and block the road, but up there, they're not allowed to block the road, and there's been arrests made for masks. So what's the difference between a few hundred yards?
So I can't comment on...
Well, who would comment on that?
I mean, you could contact our press office, the Metropolitan Police press office.
Oh, yeah.
You could contact our press office. What that lady was saying, lady known to regular viewers of Unprecedented TV, she's a real trooper. She's saying, why were you arresting people who were demonstrating against the illegal immigrants causing trouble in our community, as far as the locals are concerned? But these people, and for wearing masks, these demonstrators, these protesters, but this lot are being protected by dozens, I know, maybe 100 police officers. How can that be anything other than biased policing?
Well, it clearly is biased policing, Lembit, and the thing is, I come back to the politicisation of the police service, and I believe that a lot of the problems are created, most probably deliberately. I believe that the police are using agents who are most probably either police officers or people who've been recruited through the police to act as their agents within the various demonstrations, etc. This has gone on historically, and certainly as a police officer going back to the 70s, 80s, early 90s, that certainly police were used to infiltrate various groups, including ones who were opposing the nuclear deterrence, and they were basically police officers who, and that's well documented because we know that some of these police officers had relationships with people, usually females, who were protesters, etc., without telling them that were actually clearly they couldn't. They were police officers because they had a false identity. It's gone on certainly in relation to the IRA situation. It's gone on in relation to the miners' strike, which certainly I have knowledge of. And the police have always done that, and these people are paid, either police officers or agents who are managed by other police officers. And we know there's an inquiry in the background going on into the behaviour of some of those police officers. So do I believe police officers are involved, or certainly agents of the police? Yes, I do. And I think it goes without saying, and I think that needs to be looked at extremely closely, because clearly that comes down to government influence, interference through, no doubt, the senior officers who are put under pressure to do things. And I think it's to create the problem where they know there's going to be a reaction from the public to what's happening, and then the government are coming up with the solution. And the solution at the moment is this great push towards digital ID, which they've been trying to do now for a number of years. This isn't conspiracy theory, that's openly talking about it. So do I believe that some of those counter-protesters are connected to police or police officers? 100%. You can be certain of that.
That's a big worry. And you've mentioned there's so much to talk with you about. You're going to have to come back after you've gone to the local college to figure out how the computer works. But you're going to have to come back to talk about that. And you touched on something which strikes me as totally contradictory. Facial recognition cameras have been touted recently as part of the solution to keep us safe. And at the same time, you've got the Home Secretary saying this.
It's tougher border security measures making it harder to come to the UK. Migrants who are convicted of sex offences will be banned from claiming asylum. Loads of live updates in the studio for you tonight. Catherine Nash is here now. Hi, Catherine. So let's start with why they're doing this.
Well, these changes, Dan, are basically an extension to legal framework that already actually exists in the UK. So at the moment, if a migrant seeking protection here has committed a serious crime and has been given a prison sentence of a year or more, then they are refused refugee status. But under these new proposals, this refusal system will be extended further so that foreign nationals who have committed a sex offence are on the sex offenders register, regardless of the length of the sentences they've received. They won't be granted it either, nor will foreign nationals who've committed sex offences abroad.
I think, yeah, because I think it's very funny because it shows that one group out of three is being favoured more over another. That's what.
Sorry about that. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. She says that obviously it's not. I'm not blaming the presenter there, but here's the problem. If you've committed a sex offence abroad, you won't be given status. How do we know if they've thrown their passport in the sea? They've given their passport and their identity documents to the fish in the English Channel. So now you've got these facial recognition cameras that can recognize you or me because we're in the system, in the British system. But you've got a whole bunch of strangers who probably don't even speak English very well and certainly might be willing to disguise their identity if they are sex offenders from abroad, who can't possibly be identified as such, because there's nothing whatever in the system to say that basically they've got that problem. They got that issue about being a sex offender elsewhere. So I don't get how you can add those two things up. It's a non sequitur. I'm saying I'm not blaming that presenter. I think she accurately described the issue. But on the one side, we can all be spied on by the state in some Orwellian way. On the other side, these unknown people who come to our country deliberately disguising their identity could be anyone. Maybe they've come here because they're on the run from vigilantes in their own countries for what they did to the kids.
Well, I think we've got to turn things upside down in a way and say, why are they being allowed to come into the country? Why wasn't any monitoring done from the start? Why wasn't there any DNA? Why wasn't there any photographs taken of them for facial recognition if they were going to look to roll this out, etc. But we've got to think, was there a bigger picture here? Was there an agenda behind this? The majority, as we know, are young males. They aren't families, they aren't women, they aren't children. They now and again will show the odd female or the odd child, but generally it is lots and lots of young males, as we can see in the various hotels around the country. We've got to say it's happening not just in this country, but it's happening in many other European countries, as though it's something that's been planned. It certainly causes division within society and in communities. It's certainly caused a problem again, which the reaction is the public to react to what's happening, certainly attacks, sexual assaults, etc. going on in communities. And therefore, we're ready once again with the solution, or the government are, which is to put in place controls. But the controls are for everybody. They're not just for the people who are actually committing these offences. And as you say, the facial recognition is for me and you and average person who shouldn't be. We should have a freedom of passage, a freedom of speech in basically a country which, you know, if we're certainly born here and raised here, that we should be able to live a life without these kind of controls. So you know, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, and bear in mind my background as a police officer, you know, long-standing service with exemplary service record and a very varied career as a detective, investigative, in various fields such as special branch, such as, you know, burglary squads, stolen vehicle squads, etc. Extensive service. My investigative nose says to me that there's something from the very start doesn't look right. It all builds up a picture of a case, and the case is that these migrants, illegal immigrants, it is a facilitated entry into the country by the French and our country, the government, and that it has been organised very, very well. There's dinghies which are being returned, we know now, in vehicles which are basically contracted by the Home Office to return to France to bring more of the illegal immigrants back around again. It's a revolving carousel, and these people are coming in. And if you drive past in these hotels, I do when I'm travelling in from my rural area where I now live into places like Bradford and Leeds, etc., I pass these hotels with empty car parks, the odd car on them for people who are presumably staff or whatever. But the majority of those people, in fact, all of them that I ever see, are young males either hanging around, coming out, walking down the roads, and going back there on an evening. Very well disciplined as well, I've noticed, with you know, people who, if they speak to them, they seem to accept the order that's been given to, you know, go back into the hotel, not to be hanging around or trying to bother girls, young women, etc. And, you know, this government talked about violence against women and girls very much so, you know, after the Cousins case, the police officer who raped and murdered the young lady from York, talked about stamping down on violence against women and girls. But it certainly seems to me that they're turning a blind eye to the people that are allowing in the country, who obviously quite often have a record in their own countries of this kind of assault. They have a different culture in relation to what we consider the ages of consent in relation to sex. And these people are coming in, but the government, in my view, quite clearly, and are taking a, you know, the position of, we are turning a blind eye to it. And all our MPs, really, I don't hear many speaking up about it, but I think once they become an MP, they seem to be conflicted, compromised, that they no longer speak for the people that they should be serving in the communities. They all seem to disappear into the Westminster bubble, and they don't want to be controversial. And more and more people, we need to stand and speak and say what is going on. And our elected representatives are not giving us the answers. Our senior police officers certainly aren't. They're more politicians than police officers. And those senior officers are basically, should be actually quite often with a lot of these instructions they get in, challenging them from Home Office, from government, to say, no, we are serving the people. We will be fair, impartial, and act without fear or favour. I'll come back to that. And they're not doing that. So I personally, well, I'll be accused of conspiracy theory, believe that the whole agenda is being orchestrated, not just by our government, by other governments, to destabilise the society so that they can introduce controls such as digital ID, facial recognition, all the things we're seeing happening. And whilst most people say, well, I have nothing to fear, likewise, I have nothing to fear. I've got an unblemished, you know, track record, an exemplary track record in both the police, business, the community. But we need to be saying that something isn't right in what's going on. And personally, I think that we are being destabilised so that they can bring in further controls, particularly the digital recognition, etc. And it's a lot to do with the fact that most economies in the West are absolutely shot, i.e. the systems ready to collapse again, as they did last time in 2008 when I was in banking. And I think they're trying to come up with the digital type of currency system, the stable coins, the CBDC, central banking digital currency. But to do that, of course, they need digital ID. And to some extent, they did try doing that with the COVID vaccination passports, which they would have liked to have got more people signed up, and then they could have most probably brought forward the central banking digital currency. So they're once again pushing and trying to get people into that. And you know, I aren't bothered if people accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist. I am a very practical guy who's got to a point in life where I've done many, many things, and I believe that I should have a voice and I should be able to pass my message on just as anybody else should.
Yeah, just to finish on this, I want to do one other quick subject. It is important about what's happening in Alaska. But there's a film called Anon, A-N-O-N. It's a great film. I watched it on a plane once. It's a tremendous statement about what we've been discussing. And in that film, this isn't really a spoiler alert, it's worth watching. The main female character says to the main male character at one point, who's a police officer, "It's not that I've got something to hide. There's just nothing I want you to know." And she vanishes. And I think that's right. Just because you want your privacy doesn't mean that you're a criminal. Also, as I often say, that he who is without blame cast the first stone. We've all been imperfect human beings. Otherwise, we should be setting up a church. And I just don't take kindly to a state which has proved itself repeatedly to be corrupt. And at the beginning of our conversation about the police, willing to politicize law and order, apparently with the acquiescence of at least some chief constables. Why would we give them more information about ourselves? Thank you for that. One other subject I want to talk about, and that's the Alaskan Accord, or if there can be one.
Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.
Now, depending if you're watching this live or as live, either the debate between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump is about to happen, or it has happened. Either way, I want to have a quick conversation with you about Keith, about the situation there. But hopefully, this will have currency, even if you're watching this in the archive. The European Union has been bleating and moaning about not being included in the general peace talks around the Ukraine conflict, and this has led to a very heady and very important conversation to be held, which may have been held by the time you're watching this, in Alaska, between Trump and Putin. Everyone else has been excluded. Now, my opinion is that it's just as well, because all we've seen from, for example, Keir Starmer is an effort to try to politicize this and build his own credibility. And I don't think he's done this with great success. Quite recently, invited Zelensky to his Downing Street residence, grace and favor residence, as we say. But what for? Keir Starmer has no influence here. And he has no influence, I think, because he has nothing useful to contribute. I'll tell you my view, and then you can agree or disagree with it, Keith. For the last 3 years, all the Conservatives and Labour and Liberal Democrats in Britain and Europe as a whole have done is say, oh, more war, more war. Let's beat the Russians, even though no one has in the history of Russia beaten the Russians. And so it had all these photo opportunities all the time. It's sick making in a way. Look at all this. Now, I think Starmer is desperately unpopular, but I have very little respect for Zelensky as well. He's a war loser. He's a professional clown, and he doesn't have a fraction of the experience needed to do his job. Now, maybe you have a different view. But I think that Trump and Putin have excluded Zelensky and Starmer and all the others because they have nothing to say whenever it really comes to America and Russia, who at the end of the day were having the war because America broke a promise to Russia from decades ago to try and make the peace. Now, you may have a different view, Keith. Don't be driven by me.
Well, clearly, this is a war that didn't just start in February 2022. It started in February 2014. And that's the first part, which the media and everybody else seems to have lost sight of. We've got a guy, comic, who was a professional comic on TV, Zelensky, who walks around with these type of military fatigues everywhere he goes, obviously not got a suit, but I presume that's because at 5'6", maybe nearly 5'7", he wouldn't be that impressive a figure on the world stage. He's managed to appear on Vogue magazines, etc., and go to various award ceremonies. And here we are, a guy who's been excluded from the talks in Alaska between Putin and Trump. Why? Because, well, if you're not invited, you are basically on the menu meaning that you're not going to be part of it. And the Zelensky himself, you know, personally, having served in the police force, which I go back to again, and dealt with obviously drug issues, etc., I've got to say he's certainly got some problems with his eyes and his nose. He's constantly rubbing his nose, twitching like a rabbit all the time. And of course, you know, we're not alleging anything, of course, but we've got then our own leader, Mr. Starmer, who at one point was accused of possibly being involved with Macron and the German Chancellor, where there was a bag of white powder allegedly on a table in front of them. And we've got, of course, the story which is subject to...
It's been proved. It's been the stuff of rumour. It's been the stuff of rumour.
Absolutely, but you know, you build up a little bit of a picture with rumours, and obviously they don't always mean it's the truth. But we've got super injunctions preventing basically people talking about, and of course it might be totally unconnected, Ukrainian rent boys, 3 of them, all arrested in custody to face trial next year in relation to attacking property belonging to our Prime Minister of the day. That should be a massive story, a massive topic for the media, investigative journalists, etc., to be looking at what is going on. Starmer meets Zelensky yesterday as though it's a long lost love, the way they hug each other. I've never seen anything like it with so-called world leaders. And we've got talks taking place because Europe don't need to be involved, because Trump will make the decision, or I think he already has most probably, that they know that Russia are in total control in Ukraine, and that basically the Ukrainians, all they are is basically poor people who are being sent to the front line, grabbed from the streets, grabbed from the houses, bundled into vans, taken for a little bit of 3 weeks training or whatever, sent to the front line and getting wiped out. Nearly 2 million dead, most probably Ukrainians. The Russians aren't having anything like the losses, whatever they might say, and they're making ground all the time. And Russia, it was a special operation to protect the east of Ukraine. They achieved that, and basically they lost the war a long time ago. A
couple of things. I don't have the information to know what Zelensky's personal habits, nor Starmer's, nor the almost anonymous German leaders' personal habits are. But the fact we spend so much time talking about them indicates how little we respect their political position. Churchill had some quite dramatic personal habits, but people don't talk about that mainly. They talk about his endeavors in World War II. So we've got people so weak in European and British politics that it's more interesting to talk about what they were doing, which wasn't directly related to their political statements, than we have to do with their political statements. And I don't want to be in that situation. I think we have a 4th division cohort of politicians, and it's hardly surprising that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump don't want Zelensky at the table, because I think that would constrict their ability to converse. Donald Trump often says this is Joe Biden's war, and I'm inclined to agree. It's not just Joe Biden's war. Trump maybe didn't have his eye on the ball the first 4 years, because he was still learning the job. But it's quite clear that it was NATO expansionism and other matters that caused Putin to take a reaction which he warned he would take. And now we've got Trump and Putin meeting, thank goodness, and Europe and Starmer bleating that they should be there. Just imagine the entire might of the European Union and Ukraine and the United Kingdom had a phone call with Trump. That was it. I actually think that's fitting, don't you, Keith?
It absolutely is, and I think they are second rate to the European leaders, and that's clear. That's why they've been excluded from it. I think it's been a massive money laundering operation, and the amount of money that Europe are pumping into Ukraine, most of it going straight out of the back door. And, you know, certainly I think that there should be big questions asked. There's been no proper auditing, which is in wartime. I think that it was lost was the so-called war, which actually to be fair to Putin, always classed it as a special operation to protect the people in the east, the region, Russian-speaking people who were at one point part of Russia. And I think that he did that. I think they've clearly, if they thought he was going to be a walkover, they were vastly mistaken. Very, very strong leader. And, you know, if we're honest about it, he is very popular in his country if you go by proper polls that are conducted, not the ones which say that he's very, very unpopular. So it depends which side of the fence you look at it from. But as an observer from afar, and obviously not being an expert on world affairs, which I admit, my observations are very much that I see this Mickey Mouse character, this guy walking around in his fatigues everywhere he's going, etc., going and meeting European leaders and managing to go to, say, award ceremonies or cover things. In a war, we don't, and we seem to be fed what the media wants us to see in relation to these wars. All these people now with mobile phones and cameras, amazing, we don't get much of this footage because, again, it's all controlled through the government, which is clamping down on our freedom of speech and a freedom of what we should know about. And when I've referred to certain things, I've got to look at it as an observer and say, I see a trend. I see a trend with our European leaders that is very worrying because I don't think that they are serving the people. I think that they're self-serving themselves. And I think that shows from the conflict, the amount of sponsorship, donations they get either personally or to their offices, etc., which are unfortunately compromising and making the decision making, including laws of this land, based on quite often people who are putting them under pressure. We know they've always been lobbying, but I don't think it's ever been quite to the extent that it is now. And it was supposed to be all getting clamped down on the expense, etc. It hasn't. And they're abusing quite often, many of them, the positions they're in, or they're being forced to go along with things and they're not standing up to be counted and represent the people because they know they'll be sidelined. And, you know, that's my view of the world. And if people don't like it, I'm happy for people to disagree with me or tell me.
Well, I have to say that your view of the world, I imagine, accords with many other people's as well, Keith. We're nearly out of time. Just let me ask you then two final, very short questions. First of all, in terms of the potential for an Alaskan Accord, is it your view that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin do need to consult with anyone else, or do you think they've got the power to make a peace?
I think Trump's made his mind up with his people in America that they want out of this because they know they've lost it. So they know there's no purpose in trying to do any more with it. If they're quite happy to allow the Europeans to carry on grandstanding, thinking they're doing something, and it will purely be about pumping more money and money laundering because they cannot defeat the might of Russia.
And finally, how well has the coalition of the willing done? Remember that phrase? The coalition of the willing, from Keir Starmer. What's your view?
Well, I think the problem is Keir Starmer is somebody who clearly is out of his depth. I think he's not as good as people imagined he would be, having been ex-head of the CPS, etc. To say that he's supposedly been in law, I don't see that in relation to how he conducts himself in terms of interviews or his presence with world leaders. He's become a joke. We know there should be an election, but there again, it's a uniparty option of who you go for because, you know, unfortunately, the Conservatives realise that they're nowhere. Reform are an organisation which there's big question marks over, certainly from my point of view. So, yeah, the Starmer should be going, and to me he's totally compromised as the man he was before he came into power because he'd accepted all these gifts from Lord Ali and over £1 million of gifts allegedly. So I think that we're unfortunately in difficult times, and I'm waiting for somebody, hopefully somebody to emerge who would be somebody that the people can get behind. And I'm hoping a lot of independent parties, a lot of the smaller parties maybe decide to work together, throw egos aside and get rid of the uniparty option, which is Conservative, Labour, Reform, Lib Dem.
Keith, thanks so much. We're out of time. That is Keith Tordoff MBE. Agree or disagree? Either way, I'm sure that you agree he's good value in terms of sharing his points of view. Have yours as well. You can watch this on X or on YouTube, and very soon on Rumble and other channels as well. Lots more to watch. If you're watching this as live, you can compare what we've said with what actually happened in Alaska. But don't forget, we've got a wonderful stable of really impressive presenters. I'm Len Topic. That was Len Topic Live on Unprecedented TV. I'll see you soon.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,